In this tutorial video, we're going to be using recycled materials, this paperboard from food packaging and magazines to make these sculptures. Are three-dimensional and they can actually stand up when done correctly. These are called slotted sculptures because they have slits cut into them that will come right down one into the other and be able to hold those pieces together. We're going to be using food packaging called paperboard, as well as old magazines to make these recycled three-dimensional bunnies. To make your slotted sculpture bunny, all you're going to need is the printable. This is enough to make two bunnies. You have a standing as well as a sitting bunny, plus they have the same back legs and the same head and ears. So this is enough to make one bunny and a second. Plus you will also need a pencil, a pair of scissors, a glue stick, chipboard, paperboard, which is the packaging from like cereal boxes and snacks, as well as optionals, a magazine. If your chipboard is not like the most beautiful of chipboard, if yours is instead more like a giant Cheez-It, then you can cut and use the colors inside magazines to give yourself a prettier look. So instead of having my cheddar cheese bunny, I can have my color blocked springtime colors bunny. First thing I'm going to do is cut out my template. So I'm going to start with my standing bunny first, and I'm just going to need one of my bunny torsos, one of my bunny heads, one leg, and that torso shape. And I'm just going to take a minute and cut out my three shapes. If you do plan to make both bunnies, I have my one bunny shape here, but these are the same. You don't need to recut your legs and your headpiece. You could just cut your second bunny shape and then reuse these two pieces. You don't need to waste your time cutting out the other ones. They are a matching set. So now I'm going to use my paperboard. So I'm just going to cut open along one of my flat creases here and open up my box into flat sheets. And if you like your paperboard, you can kind of aim for a certain area where you want that color to show. But since I plan to cover mine, it can go anywhere and be really any side. And I'm just going to use my pencil to trace around my three bunny shapes. I always try to work in the corner of my packaging to make sure that I get as much out of it as I can. I never want to put anything right into the center of the board. And then also, I did not cut out my slots, my little slits here. I measured them to about 3/4 of an inch, and I'm kind of marking where I need to cut. But you could either cut those out, and then while you're tracing, try to get kind of down into that line. That could be a little bit hard to do to get your pencil in that little slit. You could also re-measure out 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so I have all three of my shapes traced out, and now I'm just going to need to cut those out. This paperboard is a little thicker, of course, than your copy paper, so it takes a little bit more scissor strength, but just do your best. Whenever I'm trying to cut down into corners, instead of turning my scissors and trying to cut out of my corner, because that usually bends that board, I'm just going to come down my other line and cut kind of a V shape so that can just pull right out without having to turn my scissors and cut out of that area. All right, so the last thing I need to cut here are my little slits for my slotted sculpture. And again, I was just kind of trying to cut these lines about 3/4 of an inch long. And I want to cut not just a single line, but rather a tiny space. Imagine the thickness of this paperboard. That is about the thickness you want to cut. So I'm basically cutting up the right and the left side of my lines in a way. I'm going to kind of recenter this one, but keeping my scissor lines super close together. I'm just trying to cut out the smallest little paperboard here. And again, your goal is about 3/4 of an inch for you to cut. You can always go back and trim that up a little bit higher, and you may end up using your magazines to kind of bring that line back in if you need to, if you cut it a little bit too long. So I'm just gonna cut out, I have one on my legs, one here on the bottom of the head, and then where my legs are going to attach here and at the top of my head. If you have any lines you need to erase and clean up, now would be a good time to take your eraser on that paperboard and clean those. And if this paperboard that you chose, like one of my bunny examples here, is a really pretty paperboard, you are lucky and you could be done. But if you have, for instance, Cheez-It Bunny, it doesn't exactly make the most springtime looking bunny, then I'm gonna show you how to collage with a magazine to give yourself a better looking spring bunny. So you can, let me switch to this one. With this collage, I just kind of did some color blocking, and I was using a box here, and it's kind of okay colors, but it's not my favorite. So I'm going to use some cut magazines. I was just looking through magazines for a little range of colors. Chose to do some pinks and oranges for spring. And I just, let me get a scrap paper to glue on so I don't glue all over my table. And I need to cover up this last little bit. And so I'm just going through my magazine. And then I'm just simply going to glue stick these shapes on, and then I'm going to end up trimming them where they overlap. So glue, I have this nice purple glue that I can see where it's been, and I'm just going to stick my shapes on. And since it's color blocking, it just kind of is a big block of color. You could also cut out shapes if there's like fun flowers or any kind of spring shapes. You could trim these shapes down if you want to give yourself a different kind of look to it. And I'm just going to glue stick these all over. And then now that I have my ugly side of my chipboard covered, I can just go in and trim. This one will be a lot easier to cut, this really thin magazine paper. And I'm just gonna trim all this excess paper off so I have just my silhouette again. So I'll just need to recut my slits down into all of my boards. They may need to be lengthened if you're having a hard time getting this to come all the way down with the legs. They need to be right here, just kind of even with each other so it sets up on the table. So if the legs are hanging out wrong, it's not going all the way down, you may need to trim up these slits a little bit longer. And then the headpiece here, you're gonna want the headpiece to come down. So about where this top of the head is, you want that even with about the top of the head here, and you may need to go back in and trim that. So the cool thing about this is that it's two-sided, so you can decide whether you want, depending on how you want to display it, if you want to see the craft paper front or if you want to see the colorful front. And you can mix and match how you want that to go. You can also mix and match your different bunny pieces so you can collage them differently, but I could easily just trade out my different bunny parts so that they can go together here. And that's it, a fun little recycled craft project with just that food packaging, some magazines, and supplies you probably have at home. So hope you enjoyed.